Welcome, parents. We want to get started and get things going. I want to welcome you to the second grade Child Find Parent Meeting. I appreciate your time this evening. We'll try to keep it brief and move along. I'm Gene Balding. I'm the Gifted Specialist for Tuscumbia City Schools. I serve K through 12. So I serve everyone, take care of everybody in the Gifted program from kindergarten through 12th grade. We want to get started tonight with what is a second grade Child Find, and want to explain that. You've received some consent forms. Many of you have filled that out already. Some of you have not returned them yet, but we want to give you a chance this evening to understand that, and I'm going to go through that and a little bit about the Gifted program and also what is part of this Gifted Child Find program. First of all, it's a state-required process in which the gifted teacher and the second grade teachers work together to identify students for gifted services when they move to R.E. Thompson in the third grade. The process gives all the students an opportunity to be considered for gifted services. And we kind of cast a wide net for this Child Find process. I believe this year I've got about 41 or 42 students we are considering for the Gifted program and screening for the Gifted program, and we will probably get about 5% of those students qualified for gifted services. Now, last year we had 50 or 55 students, and I had 10 students qualify for gifted services out of this Child Find process. So it is a small number of students who will qualify for the gifted services when they get to R.E. Thompson, but the state wants us to cast a wide net. They want us to make sure we don't miss anybody, and then everyone has an equal chance of being considered for the gifted program. So the big question is to you is, how does this process work? And if you look at this next slide, it's what's included in the process. Well, first of all, the classroom teachers use something called a TABS observation form, and this starts in the beginning of the year. As soon as these students begin in second grade, these teachers begin to evaluate them and look at them and see which ones may be a good candidate to look at for the second grade Child Find gifted screening process. So what the teachers do is they have been trained by me. I've trained them on how to look for these behaviors and how these show up in the classroom. So the teachers look for these traits, these list of traits here you can see on this slide, that there are many traits that they will look at, and they want to look at these traits and these aptitudes and behaviors, and that's where TABS comes from. And these are traits, aptitudes, and behaviors that are associated with giftedness, and you'll see them on the list below here. And what the teachers are looking for is an above average or superior rating in these traits, and they want to see which one stands out, like motivation. How is a child really motivated? Do they take to things well and they stick to it? Their interest, do they have some different kind of interests? Their imagination and creativity, that's something we look at a good bit with some of the things I do with them. Their problem-solving ability, the humor, the inquiry, all these characteristics here are looked at and scaled and scored to give us possible candidates to look at for the gifted program. So the second step in this process is what turns over to me is about 6 or 7 weeks of work with the students, and we have activities that we do that are prescribed by the State Department of Education, and students all over the state do this in second grade. Every student in second grade in the state of Alabama does this. They do 3 drawing activities, and that allows the students to show their creativity. They get these little squiggle marks, and they have to turn them into something and show their creativity and what they can turn those squiggles into, and that's what I rate and grade on is what they turn the squiggles into. I lay all the students in a class's papers out, and I kind of look at and see which ones are really different, which ones really stand out, and we score those on a scale of 0 to 5 for their creativity. Then the students also produce a writing sample, which is another method to show students' thinking skills and creativity. I read a book to the students and show them the repetition in the book and how that went and how the author used that to tell a story, and then the students are given the opportunity to create their own story, something different, and that's a great way to see how they think and how they process things and create writing. The students are also given some puzzles to solve that test their analytical reasoning skills. These puzzles they look at a shape and they see, okay, how does this work? How these two work together, and then they look at a new set of puzzles and see which one would create the same puzzle change, but looking at different pictures. And the students are also finally given a test to gauge their visual spatial abilities, and this test is about a 30-minute test, and the students are told that this test is very important. It's something I look at when considering students for gifted, and it's a very important test, and counts for 1/3 of their grade. The next step in the process is that the second grade teachers and I sit down in a meeting, and we look at all this information that they have collected and I have collected, and we kind of get together a list of students that would be good candidates to screen for gifted services. So we all kind of work together in creating this list. I present them some data I have, and they let me have their data on the tabs forms, and we look at all of that and we see, okay, which students do we want to screen for gifted? And a lot of times it's about half of the whole second grade class. This year the numbers were down a little bit, but we generate this list of students, and once that list has been generated, then I start the paperwork process, and the first thing I had to do is send you guys a consent form that you have to fill out and sign and check back, and also send you a gifted rights letter, and the gifted rights explains what rights you have as a parent being your child is being considered for gifted services. After you give me consent to screen them for gifted, I take all the data I've collected and grade it and evaluate it and score it, and then I put it onto a matrix that the state gives us, and I'll use that to see who will qualify for gifted services. Now, once the next step, once I receive those consent forms and we collect all that data, we'll use something called the Gifted Eligibility Screening Determination Form, and this is a matrix the state defined, and I take that matrix and it gives me numbers 0 through 5 to rate students on their work. So all the things I've collected and done with them are scaled or scored and scaled if they needed to be, and then they are placed on this matrix. And as you can see, you'll see in the next slide that this matrix has several different sections, and let's go ahead and look at that matrix. If you look on the right side of the screen, it says points chart, and you have aptitude. Well, that's one of the three things we look at is aptitude, and that's usually some type of individual test or old school. Some of you parents may have taken the SAT when you were in school, and there's part of that called the OLSAT, the Otis Lennon School Ability Test. And there's another test that all the students are given that I give is called the NNAT2. And what we do is we grade that test, and then where they fall along this line of 115 to 129, that gives them a score of either 0 or 5. So that goes into the first points chart added there on the left side, aptitude, and they can score 0 to 5. Sometimes I have given students the KBIT test, and also I've given the Torrance test. The Torrance is a creativity test. The KBIT's kind of like the OLSAT. It tests verbal and non-verbal abilities. The second thing is characteristics, and this is what the tabs form falls under. That's what teachers look at and grade those characteristics we talked about earlier. And we look at those and we grade those and score them and scale them, and they score anywhere, any way from a 0 to a 5, anywhere in that range. And on those scores, and then I plug them in here to the characteristics part of the test, or of the matrix, excuse me. Then finally we look at performance indicators, and that could be how they do on the writings, the drawings, the other things I've given them. It could also be things that teachers notice or bring out. There are several items here that can be identified under performance. We cannot look at grades. The state does not want us to use their report card grades, because a lot of times you'll find in early elementary those grades are not reflective of their abilities yet. A lot of times students score all A's, but they may not necessarily be gifted. They're just a high achiever. So we can't use grades, but those type activities that I've done with them are what we use mainly, just because we know they're a stable and reliable source of data. So once I score this matrix out, you can see here the total points earned is the last block there in the middle. And for a student to be considered for gifted, if I go back to this last slide, they've got to be score between a 17 and a 20 on the matrix to qualify for gifted. Most of my students, probably 80% of the time, score 17. Very rarely. I think I've had 1 or 2 20s in the 5 years I've been doing this. So most of them score 17 to qualify for gifted. If a student does score below a 17, they score a 15 or 16, I do refer them to the school's psychometrist, who is a psychometrist is basically a fancy name for a test giver, and they give a test to the students for them to get another score, and hopefully that score will help them qualify. It will help them get that 17. They just need one more point on the matrix, and sometimes they don't do well on the NNAT test that I give them. It is a big group test. It's 30 minutes timed, and sometimes they don't do well with that. So if you give them another type test that's not timed, and they feel a little more comfortable, maybe one-on-one. So a lot of times that will help them to do better on their test. So we plug all that information into this matrix that I showed you, and then we will finish the process up by doing any of that further testing. If the psychometrist is called in to complete that test and continue that test with the students, they will give that information to me, and I will take it and add it into their score and see if that will help them to qualify for gifted. Once I've finished all the testing, all the results are finalized, I will be mailing home a letter to you. You'll receive it in the mail, and we do that for privacy, but I'll mail that letter to you guys at home. So if you have a change of address, please make sure you pass that along to R.E. Thompson or to G.W. Trenum, so we can make sure I get the letter to the right address. But I will mail that letter just so you will know it's my goal to have that letter sent home before the end of school. Now you can see I've got goal written in red there, but if the psychometrist, who sometimes gets real busy at the end of the school year, gets real busy, I may not be able to get those letters sent home. But if she can get hold of your child and test them during the summertime, and she gets that information to me, then I will come up to school and process everything and get that letter sent home sometime during the summer if need be. And it's my goal, though, to get done. So you guys know, sometimes it's better to receive things in the summer, especially if a child does not qualify. It's easier for them. If they don't know, then you don't have anything to worry about. You get it in the mail. They're not going to get it and get hold of it and be disappointed, or maybe you've not told them that you're doing this, and you can keep it private if they don't qualify, because you don't want them to be disappointed. So if you receive the letter in the summertime, it will make it easier on everybody. So we will get that sent home to you, and you'll get a letter letting you know if they qualified or if they did not qualify. And then in the fall, when school starts back in August, I will plan a parent meeting for you to sign what's called a gifted education plan. It spells out everything that you need to know about what's going to happen over the 3 years there at R.E. Thompson, and it will also kind of let you know everything that we'll be doing in class. And the students do come to me for twice a week. They come 2.5 hours each time, so that's a total of 5 hours a week. They're out of class and miss classroom instruction, and under state law they're not required to make up any of that work, but a lot of times my third grade parents have their students bring it home just to make sure, because they are getting so much new materials and things, and they want to make sure they understand. But the program does meet twice a week for 2.5 hours, and that's while they're at R.E. Thompson. Lastly, I'd like to talk about the little handout I had for you. It's the bright child versus a gifted child, and you'll notice this information is for just you guys to kind of help you look at your child and decide maybe what type of child they are, but it just points out some things I thought would be interesting for you to know. A bright child, they know the answers, but the gifted child, they ask the questions. Bright child's interested, gifted child is highly curious. So I'm not going to bore you by reading all that to you. You can look at that flyer, and those of you who are watching the DVD, you can look at that on your screen there, and you'll be able to look at that and figure that out. And if you'd like a copy of it, just let me know, or I'll have some for you at GW Trentham. But the whole purpose in this Gifted Child Find is to make sure, as I said earlier, that we go through systematically. We look at all the children. They all have equal opportunity to be considered for gifted, no matter whatever the issues may be. There are children, and probably some of you parents are sitting there thinking, how can my child be gifted? I'm looking at this chart. I don't see any of that stuff. There is a thing called twice exceptional, and when you have a twice exceptional child, they're gifted in some areas. For instance, these kids that can see the pictures in their head and put puzzles together and see things in their head and pictures in their head, and they're called visual spatial learners. They see all these things and can do that really well, but they struggle with reading, or may have a reading disability. These twice exceptional kids are pretty neat, and we're starting to see this more and more, these twice exceptional children. So some of you are sitting there thinking, there's no way my child's gifted, and they're not going to qualify for gifted. You never know. I've had a student in the past that they did struggle in reading, but they scored really, really well on one of the tests, and I took the information to the teacher, and they were just blown away because the child struggles so in reading in their classroom. So that child is in gifted now and is doing well in my classroom and enjoys that. But we wouldn't have known that if we hadn't done some of these tests and these things that I've talked about with you tonight. And it truly does give everybody an equal opportunity, so that's what we want to do. So at this time, I'm going to give you a chance to ask any questions if you have any. If not, I don't see any hands, so if not, we will dismiss. I appreciate your time. I know everyone's busy this time of year, but I appreciate your time and you coming in this evening for this presentation.